Catherine is a genius young girl who lives in West Virginia. At the age of just 10 years, she was able to solve the most difficult math problems in elementary school. Impressed with Catherine's knowledge, the principal calls her parents and tells them that she has received a scholarship to go straight to the second grade of junior high school. Not just that, she was also admitted to the best black junior high school. In 1926, racism in America was still very severe. All public facilities are distinguished by the color of their skin, such as toilets, hospitals, schools, and even wash basins where black and white people wash their hands. We are taken to 1961, where Catherine is now an adult. One afternoon, the car she was driving with her two friends Dorothy and Mary breaks down. The girls are in a hurry to get to their work in the offices of NASA as accountants. As the girls are discussing their troubles, suddenly a policeman arrives on the scene. The policeman is suspicious of them until Mary informs them that the three of them work at NASA. Hearing this, the policemen are even willing to help them, but the girls manage on their own. Meanwhile, at NASA offices, the government staff are seen watching the news about Russia's imminent launch of the rocket before the United States. In a matter of seconds, the news quickly reaches the presidential envoy. Then, they inform the head of NASA's Space Task Group, Al Harrison, to quickly build a rocket to compete with Russia. Arriving at the office, the three ladies go straight to work. While they're distributing the work assignments among themselves, suddenly their supervisor, Mrs. Michelle, comes in and orders Dorothy to find someone who's good at analytics geometry. Dorothy immediately puts up Catherine's name, as she's the best mathematician they've got inside the building. As soon as Michelle leaves, Dorothy rushes after her as she's asked for a promotion to become room supervisor. Dorothy has worked as a room supervisor for the past year, even though she's paid like regular staff. However, Michelle arrogantly rejects Dorothy's appeal, claiming they will never assign a colored person to a supervisor role. Hidden Figures is an untold story of three brilliant African-American women, Katherine Johnson, Dorothy Vaughan, and Mary Jackson, who worked at NASA. The three women served as the brains behind one of the greatest operations in history, the launch of astronaut John Glenn into orbit. Watch till the end to find out how this visionary trio crossed all gender and race lines to inspire generations to dream big. Now, back to the video. Mary's supervisors in the rocket assembly division are confused why their prototype rockets always fail to withstand the heat of the Earth's atmosphere. Mary then tries to explain in detail the source of the problem is with the rocket. Hearing the analysis, the lead engineer, Mr. Zelensky, advises her to apply for the role of engineer. However, Mary simply replies that she will not even try for something that is impossible, hinting that white people will never let her take the role of an engineer. Next, Catherine has just transferred to the Space Task Group. At first, she's mistaken for a cleaning service, but she politely denies it. When Catherine meets her supervisor, Mr. Harrison, he asks her if she can solve one of the complex problems that they've been facing recently. She confidently replies that she can, and with that, Catherine is tasked with checking the calculations of all the engineers present in the room, including their head engineer, Paul Stafford. It's clear from the beginning that Paul doesn't like Catherine, mainly due to her skin color, and he's very dismissive of her. While at work, Catherine suddenly gets the urge to pee. Unfortunately, there are no black toilets in this division building. As a result, she had to run to the former division building, which is about 800 meters away. While working in the new division, everyone always looks at Catherine with a cynical look. After a long day at work, she still has to take care of her three daughters and her old mother. Ever since her husband and father died, Catherine became the breadwinner of the family. Fortunately, her mother is always there to look after the kids at home. One Sunday morning after church, Dorothy and Mary try to match Catherine with a soldier named Jim, even though she's not interested. On a walk with him, Jim reveals that he did not expect NASA to accept black female employees, which offended her. So, without holding back annoyance, Catherine reveals that she was the first black student to receive a scholarship to the best white university in Virginia, so Jim can now imagine how smart she actually is. The next day at the office, when Catherine goes to get coffee, she finds a small coffee pot that is specifically marked for blacks, which disheartens her. Later, Paul brings her a set of thick reports that need to be checked for calculations. However, most of the parts on the reports are scribbled with black ink, which makes it difficult to cross-check the calculations. When Catherine complains about it, Paul claims that they are classified information, and she does not have the clearance to access it. It turns out that the data in the files are the same as the data on the whiteboard, but nobody has been able to solve it. Catherine then chooses to work directly on the board. While she's on a washroom break, Harrison, Paul, and the entire research team is confused by Catherine's calculations. Up until now, they gave their everything to solve the problem, but she solved it in just a matter of minutes. Catherine is interrogated by several employees, including Paul, who questions her about the classified information, but she calmly explains in detail how she did it, which impresses Harrison. After hearing that, Harrison reprimands Paul for crossing off the data and orders him to provide as much data as Catherine requires. When Mary, Dorothy, and Catherine are together, Michelle comes over to them to inform them that Mary's application for the engineer program must be rejected because she's not fulfilled all the educational requirements. However, Mary and the others clearly know that's not the reason behind her rejection. A few days later, Dorothy is seen taking her 2 children to the city library. But while she's looking for a book, a woman calls the security guard on her, as black people are not allowed in that library. On the bus to her home, Catherine takes out the book that she secretly took from the library. She also advises her children that if they want to be respected, they must be smart. One night, Dorothy throws a party at her house for her son's birthday. There, Catherine meets Jim once again, who apologizes to her for their first encounter. Just as Jim and Catherine are slowly dancing, the radio interrupts the musical program to broadcast a piece of breaking news. Russia has successfully launched a rocket into space and has managed to explore the planet one full circle. Harrison announces that from this moment on, everyone has to work overtime until an American rocket is finally put into space. However, working overtime also does not bring any fruitful change, and the rocket tests still fail. Meanwhile, NASA brings in a sophisticated calculating machine named IBM 7090 DPS to calculate the coordinates of a point formula automatically. But unfortunately, there's not a single NASA employee who can operate that machine accurately. Being the curious cat she is, Dorothy sneaks into the engine room and studies how the machine worked all night long. The next day, she explains how the machine works to the other colored workers in the facility so that their jobs won't be in jeopardy. On the other hand, Mary goes to apply for admission into one of the white men's universities. After getting the trial schedule, she rushes back to the office and informs her colleagues about the case. A few days later, Harrison realizes that Catherine has been taking too many breaks, even though they can't afford too many leisure breaks. Being angry at her, Harrison confronts Catherine about her breaks, unaware of the fact that she's forced to walk half a mile to use the nearest bathroom. With teary eyes, Catherine angrily explains the discrimination she faces at work and the racism that she's faced all her life. This confrontation leads Harrison to knock down the colored bathroom sign and abolish bathroom segregation in the building. On May 5, 1961, the United States launched its first human spaceflight rocket, Freedom 7. The manual rocket flies successfully into space as Americans celebrate the historic success of space exploration. Even President Kennedy addresses the nation that America will continue to explore space to win the competition against Russia. Meanwhile, we see that Catherine and Jim's relationship becomes stronger as time passes by. They often are seen together traveling or just spending their time in each other's company. On the other hand, Mary tries to convince the judge that she applied to a white man's university to become the first female engineer at NASA. She presents a strong case in front of the judge, which eventually turns the tide of the case in her favor. Convinced of Mary's plea, the judge eventually allows her to enroll in a white man's university. Back in the office, Catherine asks for permission to work on the calculation formula for the next rocket launch. Although Paul is against her, judging from the results of previous work, Harrison decides to trust Catherine. But Stafford makes Catherine remove her name from reports, and her work is credited solely to Stafford. After 47 days, NASA tries to launch another astronaut into space, which fails and lands back on Earth. Unfortunately, during the landing, the capsule of the rocket is destroyed and it sinks into the sea. This disappoints the government officials who blame Harrison for sinking the public's tax money. As a result, they put pressure on Harrison to perfect the manufacture of the next rocket. Catherine gives Paul the calculated data, but he rejects them, saying the data is outdated and she has to recalculate everything from scratch. She then asks him to let her join the high-level meetings so she can always be up to date with the latest data and be more useful to the team. But as we guessed, Paul rejects her proposal and simply tells her to do her job. A few days later, Catherine once again presents Paul with outdated data and gets rejected by him. When this continues for a few days, Catherine asks for permission directly from her supervisor Harrison. Finally, he allows her to attend high-level meetings to calculate the space capsule's re-entry point. Inside the Pentagon meeting room, Harrison reports that the research team is still calculating the coordinates for the launch and landing of the rocket. However, the government envoy is not satisfied with the report and states that they want clearer conclusions. Being at a loss for words, he has to have Catherine do the impromptu calculations in front of everyone. Catherine amazes everyone in the room with her calculations and manages to buy the team some more time to finalize their maths for the re-entry point. On the other hand, Michelle informs Dorothy that she's being promoted to operate the IBM machine. But on the flip side, once the machine becomes fully operational, her co-workers will be put out of their jobs. After bargaining with Michelle, Dorothy accepts her promotion to supervise the programming department and manages to transfer her co-workers to the programming team as well. For the next few days, Catherine works thoroughly on the launch of the next rocket. She even manages to calculate some of the problems that were deemed impossible previously. One day when Catherine walks into her house, she's shocked to see everyone neatly dressed and having a special dinner for her. Just then, Jim comes in, kneels down, and proposes to the love of his heart. Filled with joy, Catherine starts crying along with her family, who happily accepts Jim. Making final arrangements for John Glenn's launch, Harrison informs Catherine that they no longer need human computers, as the IBM machine is fully operational now. As a result, Catherine is resigned to her old department, the West area. And a few days later, after returning to the old division, Catherine gets married. On February 20th, 1962, America's second rocket launch is set to begin its countdown. This time, the US mission is not just flying into space, but also roaming around the Earth's orbit. In the operator's room, Harrison notices disappearances in the data calculated by the IBM machine. Having no options left, Harrison tasks one of the engineers to find Catherine and let her verify the coordinates herself. Catherine straight away puts her skills to work and starts calculating the landing coordinates. At the same time, John Glenn, the astronaut, is on his way to the rocket. Catherine finally delivers the results to the control room, and Harrison allows her inside the control room out of respect for the work at this crucial moment. Harrison informs John Glenn that the results of the coordinates match and that the mission has a green signal. After the countdown, the shuttle successfully launches into space and starts orbiting. After the launch, as Dorothy starts packing to leave for the day, she's met by Mrs. Michelle. She gives her a letter and declares that Dorothy is now the supervisor of the programming department. And out of respect, Michelle finally addresses her as Mrs. Vaughn. However, after a while, a warning indicates the capsule's heat shield may be loose, and Mission Control decides to land Glenn after 3 orbits instead of 7. As the situation escalates in the operating room, people around the globe stare at the sky, hoping to see John Glenn's shuttle. Suddenly, they receive a signal on the radio from John Glenn, and the shuttle has successfully landed in the ocean. Harrison thanks as well as congratulates Catherine for her pitch-perfect calculations as the whole country erupts in celebrations. As the movie ends, we learn that Mary obtained her engineering degree and became NASA's first female African-American engineer, whereas Dorothy continued as NASA's first African-American supervisor. And finally, Catherine, who was accepted by Stafford as a report co-author, went on to calculate the trajectories for the Apollo 11 and Space Shuttle missions. Did you enjoy this video? If you did, check out this video now.